Kodai Senga at SoftBank is someone that major league teams have wanted for many, many, many years. Really, his coming out party was in the 2017 World Baseball Classic. Team Japan playing the US, and he comes out pumping 95 to 97. It was like, whoa, who is this guy?
What's your take on, if you're familiar with these two players, Yoshi Tsutsugo and Shogo Akiyama, who came from Japan a few years ago?
Yeah, both of them came over. The expectation was Sutsugo would be better than Akiyama. Akiyama was always seen as, it's probably a fourth outfielder. Again, a complementary player, someone who can play in the major leagues but would not be a star. He's struggled a little bit, and it's tough. The first year he came over was the pandemic. All the difficulties of being in a new country and assimilating to a new culture, a new style of baseball, and adjusting to the level of competition. Then on top of that, you have to shut down spring training and you're stuck at home in a pandemic. It was just a very difficult year for him. I think Akiyama will settle in as, a really good defender who makes contact and, contributes to the major leagues. Again, I don't think you'll ever see him making all-star games or in the starting lineup every single day for a playoff team. But again, a solid player who can do some things and that a National League team especially likes having on their bench. Yoshi Tsutsugo is interesting. I think there were definitely higher expectations for him than what he's performed so far. You remember him in the 2017 World Baseball Classic, making a lot of hard contact, including against some United States pitching when they came to play at Dodger Stadium. And he was someone I think people thought had a chance to be a true everyday player, good power hitter who could play first base every day. There was a lot of skepticism he could play the outfield. I know people talked about that, but hit 250, 260, 20 to 25 homers, hit fifth or sixth in a lineup, a solid everyday first baseman, not an MVP candidate, not an all-star, but that solid everyday first baseman that certainly provides value to a club. It just hasn't quite happened for him yet. He's bounced around a little bit. He signed that deal with Tampa Bay, went to the Dodgers. Now, he finished strong with Pittsburgh this year, and that's an opportunity where he might get the playing time he needs. With the Rays and Dodgers, those are two teams competing for the postseason every year. And if you're not performing, they're going to yank you. They're not going to give you the time to work out the kinks a little bit and maybe go through some of the struggles and adjustments you need to. So I do think Sutsugo being in Pittsburgh is probably a good fit for him because now he doesn't have to be worried of, oh, if I have 2 bad weeks, I'm going to be on the bench. He can work through his struggles, get consistent playing time, and maybe find a rhythm. We saw it a little bit at the end of last year. So I'm going to be watching him very closely in 2022 to see if we start to see the Yoshi Sutsugo we thought we were going to see coming out of Japan.
What's your take on Japanese hitters and pitchers who've played in the major leagues, such as Ichiro, Hideki Matsui, Yu Darvish, Kenta Maeda, and Masahiro Tanaka?
Yeah, I mean, all great players. Japanese pitchers in particular have had a lot of success in Major League Baseball, starting with Hideo Nomo, of course. But we just see this line of guys. You mentioned Darvish, you mentioned Tanaka, even some of the relievers. Koji Uehara. We saw Hirokazu Sawamura come over, join the Red Sox this year. He had a lot of success. It's been shown over and over again. Japanese pitchers in particular, you know, stuff is stuff, and a lot of these guys have the stuff to come over and be successful in the major leagues. Again, all those all-star starters, Darvish and Tanaka and Tani starting the all-star game this year, going back to Nomo, to all the great relievers we've talked about. I mean, Kaz Sasaki, Takashi Saito. I mean, so many of these guys have been so good. Shigetoshi Hasagawa with the Angels years ago. I mean, there's about a 20 to 25-year track record now of Japanese pitchers, starters and relievers being really good in Major League Baseball. I don't think there's ever any doubt about a Japanese pitcher when he comes over having the ability to succeed. Hitters, it's interesting because you have Ichiro Suzuki, who is obviously a Hall of Famer and one of the best hitters to ever play the game. And you have Hideki Matsui, who was obviously very, very good for a long time with the Yankees, and certainly some other guys who have had different levels of success, but have overall stayed in the major leagues. You look at Nori Aoki, even a guy like Kasuku Fukudome, who, was an all-star, kind of tailed off, never really was the star predicted, but still had some success. uh, it is seen as a little bit of a bigger jump for Japanese hitters than pitchers, just because it's a very different style of baseball. There's a lot more velocity in the major leagues than there is in NPB. And you also have in Major League Baseball, it's a lot more about power and a little less about contact. In Japan, just the style of hitting and swings and just the way players are taught is much more kind of an inside out swing, which isn't to say that there aren't power hitters in Japan. There absolutely are. But just in general, it's considered a different style of baseball. So there's still a little bit more of a jump for hitters, but there's certainly some really, really talented ones. And again, a lot of the scouts who went over and saw Shohei Ohtani, they believed he could hit. There was some skepticism from scouts domestically about how he'd hit over here, but the guys who went over in Japan and saw him, you saw the bat speed, you saw the strength, you saw the ability to adjust, and they figured that we would figure it out. So it really is at the end of the day a case by case basis, just as there's hitters in the United States who you think might hit and might won't. It really just comes down to scouting the individual player and not relying too much on stereotypes.
What Japanese players are major league teams most interested in signing right now? I just saw a report that Seiya Suzuki from the Hiroshima Carp will use the posting system this offseason to play in the US.
Yeah, Seiya Suzuki is someone that a lot of teams consider to be the best available position player in Japan. I wrote about him extensively for the Olympics this year, highlighted him as one of the top MLB prospects on Japan's Olympic team that won a gold medal. We saw him play. He's a really, really good defender. I think that's an underrated part of his game. We've seen there's definitely a lot of power in there. And I mentioned the kind of style of swing a little bit. He actually has an offensive style that a lot of scouts think will translate well to MLB. It's a little more power, a little more letting it go, which is what major league teams want from outfielders, especially. But it's not like he's someone who is just kind of a one-dimensional player. We talk about Yoshi Tsugo. For him, it was always about the bat. He was going to have to play first base. There wasn't a lot of value outside of the bat, so to speak. Seiya Suzuki has a really good arm in right field. And again, watching him play defense out there in the Olympics, he covers a lot of ground, moves well to his right, to his left. So there's a very real sense that he can be a solid everyday player in the major leagues. Who, again, hits 260, 20, 25 home runs, plays really good defense, makes probably some game changing plays with his arm. We've all seen it. He can really gun some guys down on the bases. I think that would be the expectation, kind of that solid everyday starting right fielder, not a superstar, but a good player. And a lot of teams are interested in him because he can do a little bit of everything. He's a very well-rounded player who would fit for a lot of teams.
Any other players?
Yeah, primarily pitchers. Kodai Senga at SoftBank is someone that major league teams have wanted for many, many, many years. Really, his coming out party was in the 2017 World Baseball Classic. Team Japan playing the US, and he comes out pumping 95 to 97. It was like, whoa, who is this guy? And he's continued that. We saw him in the Olympics this year, again, getting up to 99 through a couple scoreless innings against Team USA. So there's no question his stuff plays against hitters over here. He was hurt for a little bit this year and seeing what his health status is. But as you know, SoftBank has never posted a player in its history. They do not post players. So major league teams have had to wait for him to become a free agent, which I believe is happening after 2022. I know the way service time in Japan works is a little different than the way service time in the US works. So his injury might affect that, as I understand it. But he's someone that you talk about who's the number one player in Japan teams want. Kodai Senga is number one atop that list.
Any other names?
Yeah, there's a couple. Tetsuya Yamada has obviously been a star in NPB for many, many years now. He's a little bit on the older side compared to some of the other guys, but he's still a really good player. He's someone teams have had interest in for a few years. And if he were to be made available, he certainly would have his choice of opportunities. There's a young pitcher who we saw in the Olympics, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who some teams really, really like because he's a little bit younger. He's also kind of a smaller guy. There's a little more of a split opinion on him. Some teams love him a lot. Other teams like him, but don't see him as kind of, a top guy. But if he were ever to be made available, whether it's through the posting system or free agency, I know he's a couple years away from that. He's someone teams would certainly have interested in. It would have interest in. Those are really the main four. The young third baseman, Murakami, who played really well in the Olympics, he's someone teams also have interest in. Again, he's really, really young. He's someone that is a couple years away. So, we have to see what that's going to look like when that time comes. But he's someone teams are watching closely. And of course, you have Tomoyuki Sugano, who a lot of teams were interested in last year. However, due to the pandemic and a lot of concerns about finances, he ultimately made the decision to return to Japan. So, we have to see what that looks like. But he's an old veteran. A lot of major league clubs respect a lot, and if he were to try and come back out, there certainly would be some interest.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future videos. You can also watch our past videos from the description below. Hope to see you again next time.